Hello, everyone, and welcome to No Budget DIY Marketing for Indie Games. My name is Michelle, and I've been helping independent developers market their games for years. Over the next hour, I'll give you advice, tips, and a plan to market your game without spending any money and spending very little time. This presentation is intended for people who don't have experience marketing a game and who are looking for ways to do it themselves. So people who are solo devs or working in small teams that don't have the time or budget to hire an actual marketing person to help them out. My clicker does not work. A bit about me before we get started, just so you know the information I'm giving you is legit. I've been working in marketing and PR for over 6 years now, and specifically in indie games for the past 3 years. I previously did marketing at an indie games publisher where I worked on over a dozen games, and I'm currently senior producer at indie games publisher Armor Games Studios. Over the years, I've had the privilege to work on some truly incredible indie games like Cozy Grove, Sailforth, the recently announced Balladins, and many more. And I'm excited to share my experience in marketing indie games with you. This presentation is divided into 4 sections that will break down marketing into a more easily approachable set of tasks that you can do yourself. First, I'll go over how to communicate the message of your game. It's vital to be able to describe what your game is in as few words as possible, since most of marketing is trying to catch people's attention as quickly as you can. Next, I'll review social media and how to cultivate a following. I know there are as many different opinions on social media as there are people out there, but there's one thing that we should generally agree on, and that it's very important to use social media to get the word out there about your game. Then, I'll go into the meat of this talk. This is my hour-a-day marketing plan. This plan will break down marketing tasks into a schedule that takes 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. Marketing a game does not have to be a full-time job. And finally, I'll talk about marketing around your game's launch and post-launch, since marketing doesn't end once the game's released. I'll also go through a little bit of the marketing beats that you can do leading up to your game's launch. To start, let's talk about developing your message. Without a clear message, you'll have a hard time communicating what your game is about, and that's the most important part of marketing. The next few slides, I'm going to show you a short description of an indie game without the title. And once I show them, I'll let you take a moment to see if you can figure out what game the short message is communicating. Here's the first game description. An online and local party game of teamwork and betrayal for 4 to 15 players in space. I'll give you a few seconds to see if you can guess this one. Yep, this is Among Us. Nearly everyone knows about Among Us now, but what I love about this description is that it could very easily have been the description for the game when it released in 2018, when it was a small indie game made by a small team. This description hits some very important points. It tells you what the style of gameplay is. By starting the description with online and local party game, this is communicating that social play is the most important part of the game. The space setting, the types of characters, the art style, that's not necessarily the point of the game. This game isn't being marketed toward fans of outer space, it's being marketed toward fans of party games. The words teamwork and betrayal. These 3 words communicate that this game is both a cooperative and a competitive game. It doesn't have to say, like the party game Mafia, to communicate that it is like the party game Mafia. You don't need to compare your game to other games to explain what it is. And if you find yourself relying on those comparisons, you should work on solidifying a better idea of what your game is about that doesn't rely on the audience's knowledge of another existing game. For 4 to 15 players. Players know exactly how many people they need to play this game. They won't buy it thinking it's a single or a 2-player game and then get upset when it isn't. And similarly, they know they can play it with a larger group of people. And this is again emphasizing the party aspect of the game. And then that final little tag, in space, this hints at the setting, which is honestly enough to distinguish the description from other similar games. Players don't need to know they're playing as crewmates in a spaceship and they have to do tasks on the ship and figure out who the imposter is. That information all bogs down the clarity of this description. Among Us is first and foremost a party game, and that's what this messaging prioritizes. Here's the second game description. Even the smallest person can make a big difference. Join Alba as she sets out to save her beautiful island and its wildlife, and possibly start a revolution. If you know this game, you already know what it is. Alba, a wildlife adventure. This short description tells you that it's going to be a heartwarming story with a small protagonist who has a big heart. It prioritizes the story of the game, which shows you it's going to be a narrative-focused game. It gives you the name of the character in the short description itself. And by including that name, it personifies the main character, and it helps people remember the title of the game. It also tells you what the story is going to be about. Alba has to save her island and its wildlife, so you know it's likely going to be a story focused on conservation and nature. And finally, it gives you a taste of the tone of the game, with the slightly tongue-in-cheek and possibly start a revolution at the end. This lets you know that it's not going to be sweet, it's not all going to be sweet and cozy, and it'll probably grapple with some deeper themes. Now, the first step to crafting your game's message is to define your audience. It's very important to make sure you know who's going to play your game and who wants to play your game. You can't just assume that anyone who likes video games in general is going to like your specific game. So take some time to narrow down who you think is most likely to play your game. Hopefully it is people like you, since you are presumably making a game that you like to play, people who like the genre of your game, people who like the mechanics of your game, and people who like the type of story that you're telling. You can also find your audience in people who have interests that align with your game. For example, if you're making a game about lassoing horses, you can appeal to horse riders and fans of Western films. A lot of times you can find an audience who don't necessarily play a lot of video games, but they do have interests that are aligned with the kind of game that you're making. The way you craft your game's message is up to you, but I'll give you a few good templates to start. Remember, figure out what the most important part of your game is to communicate to your defined audience, and base your message around that. For example, if you're working on an action-focused game, you may want to use the first template here. Verb in a noun while you verb. Say your game is a roller derby cowboy simulator where you need to protect your village from hordes of horses whose sole goal is to trample everything they see. You could say, lasso evil horses in the Wild West while competing for the big roller derby title. This lets players know that your game is focused on the action of lassoing, it gives a little bit about the setting, and then it gives you just a little bit more about the story of the game and what other actions you might be taking. Or if the game you're making is capitalizing on a popular genre, you could use this template. Game name is a genre where you verb and verb. For example, Horse Bandits is a roguelike shoot-'em-up where you shoot horseshoes and lassos at horses to stop them from stomping all over your crops. If you're making a game in a genre that has a particularly avid fan base, it's good to call out that genre as much as you can to attract those fans. Or if you're making a narrative-focused game, you could start the description with a brief bit of story detail, followed by a diegetic call to action. So, the town of Horseburg used to be idyllic before the evil horses attacked, and only one hero can save them. Will you take up the lasso? This signals to the player that story is prioritized in the game, so fans of narrative-focused games will be interested in playing it. It's important to identify what your audience will find the most appealing about your game and to come up with a pitch that concisely explains why they should be interested. If you find yourself struggling to define your game in a simple way, think back to when you first came up with the concept of the game and go from there. Did you excitedly call your friend and tell them about your bullet hell with horses game idea? Did you sketch a cowboy on a napkin with the name tag Hero of Horseburg? That's a good way to get to the core of your game, what it's really about, and that can help you craft the message of your game. After you've figured out your short description or your pitch, it's important to solidify a list of bullet points that clearly communicate more of the important aspects of your game. This list is really useful to put on your Steam page, in your press kit, and to send to press and influencers when you're reaching out to tell them about your game. Bullet points can include the following, depending on what's relevant and what's important to your game. What's the gameplay like? What are some of the mechanics of the game? What's the story? What's the art style? Is it 2D, 3D, pixel art? What's the soundtrack like? How many levels or worlds are there? Is it a multiplayer online game? Is it a single-player game? What's the length of the campaign? It's important to note that these bullet points should express the unique aspects of your game. If you're making a fantasy RPG called Dwarves and Elves Go to War, you don't need to include a bullet point about the fact that there are dwarves and elves going to war in your game. But you should include a bullet point about the rhythm minigame set to 80s disco music, since that is a unique aspect of the game that likely won't be clear in the title or the short description. Here's a good example of some bullet points. Shovel Knight does an excellent job representing what I've just walked you through. It tells you the style of the game, which is 8-bit. It tells you a little bit about the mechanics of the game. So there's jumping, there's fighting, digging up treasure, exploring, upgrading. It tells you the soundtrack and the composer. If someone is contributing to your game that is a well-known name or they have a lot of fans, you can call them out in the bullet points to get a little more attention. It also tells you the art style. Big, beautiful pixels harkens to the pixel art nature of the game. It adds a little note that it's accessible to everyone. It has balanced gameplay. It has a little bit of information about the narrative, so it lets you know that while it's not a story-focused game, there is still story in the game. It tells you about the challenge mode, so this way it'll appeal to people who are interested in a more challenging game. And then there's information about the co-op mode for people who want to play with their friends. Now, these bullet points don't necessarily tell you what happens in the game or what the process of playing it is like, but they do lay out in an easily digestible way things that may hook potential players. Now that you've crystallized the message of your game, it's time to build a following, or refine the one that you already have. There are 4 big things to remember when you're building a community for your game. First, people follow people, not games. Now, I'm going to contradict myself right away and say that this is not always true. Huge games like Destiny 2 or Among Us or Cult of the Lamb, they may find followers because of the people who like the game itself. But it's also important to note that those communities have great community managers and marketing people. But if you're at this talk, I'm going to assume that you don't already have a following of hundreds of thousands of people, and you're looking for advice as to how to build up your community. In the small indie space, people tend to follow developers instead of games. If you're a fun and personable person to follow, you'll be able to attract a community to you that's interested in who you are and what you're doing. Be genuine and true to who you are in the space you want to be in. If you're a shitposter, keep doing that. You don't need to change your whole personality to try to appeal to a bunch of different people. If you like posting informative threads about various aspects of game development, that's a great way to share info about yourself and about the game. And people love learning. When you're starting out, it's incredibly important to engage with other people on whatever social media platform you're using. No one is an island. Make sure you're supporting other devs, you're interacting with your fans. Show people you care about them beyond them as potential consumers. This is how you cultivate a community. Your biggest fans will come from people that you're the biggest fans of. They're your best marketing tools, but make sure you don't think of them as tools. And most importantly, be kind. Keep your public criticisms of other games, other people, etc., to a minimum. You never know who's going to see your posts, and you don't want to create a following of haters. If you're constantly engaging in drama or criticizing other people or games, the people following you are going to be people who enjoy consuming that sort of negative content and also potentially creating that negative content, which is not a good foundation of followers when you're trying to market a game. Great. So now you know how to build a following. But what are the practical steps you need to get started? Well, I'm glad you asked. If you're starting from scratch, choose the social media platforms that best suit your online style and audience, and set up accounts. I'll go into more detail later about how to decide that. Then you want to set up a website and a press kit for your game. The website should contain information and links to everything. You want one central hub where people can go to get all the information they need about your game. What it is, a trailer for the game, how to contact you, how to follow the game, when it's releasing, what platforms it's coming out on, etc. You can Google Indie Video Games Press Kit, and you'll get a template that's super easy to use. And this is really vital to provide information to the press. You don't ever want to be in a situation where a member of the press wants to cover your game, but doesn't because they don't have access to important materials about your game. That's why you want to make sure you have a press kit. And then set up your Steam page. Once you start building up followers, you need somewhere to direct them to go wishlist your game. I'll go more into setting up the Steam page later. And then set up a Discord if you have the capacity to manage it. A Discord is not necessary, but it can be very important to keep your community in one place, to be able to interact with your fans directly and provide dev updates in a chill way. And put up a demo. This is a great way to get people interested in your game. Don't do this until you're ready, of course, and be willing to hear and respond to feedback. But there are plenty of Steam Fests that you can put a demo up for, or you can put a demo of your game up on itch.io to make sure that you can send people to a place where they can play your game and get a better sense of what it's like. A lot of people will discover demos of games just by scrolling through itch. A lot of content creators do that as well, so it's worth looking into. Now I'm going to go into the various social media platforms you can use to promote your game. To start, let's talk about Twitter. I used to be a very strong proponent of using Twitter to engage with people and market your game, but in the past 2 years, the site has fallen pretty far from grace. So while it's still important for networking, it's not the most vital platform for marketing. If you decide to start a Twitter, you'll need to decide if you want a studio Twitter, a game Twitter, and/or a personal Twitter. A personal Twitter is good for showing the person behind the game. This goes back to the people follow people tip. But it can also be harder to separate your personal musings from important stuff about the game. So if you're the kind of person that likes to tweet every thought that pops into your head, it's better for you to set up a separate account for your game. If you're working with a group of people, you should either have a studio Twitter or a game Twitter, so fans can follow one account to get updates. It's hard to cultivate a community if your updates are scattered across multiple different people's Twitter accounts. And remember, people follow people, so even if you're running a studio game Twitter, a studio or a game Twitter, followers will still engage more when they know they're engaging with a real person. Social media can feel disingenuous, especially if you're not used to it, but try to be fun, kind, and engaging. You don't need to be corporate or stilted. You don't need to speak in marketing speak all the time. You're making a video game. That's a cool thing. That's a fun thing. And you want tweets that people will enjoy reading and want to interact with. And feel free to post about more than just your game. You can post random thoughts, support your fellow indie devs. You can post, a fun meme that's relevant to the game that you're making. Anything that'll get people to engage with the content that you're making. And importantly, don't overload your tweets with hashtags. They're not the discovery tool that you think they are, and they're really only good for specific things, like hashtag Screenshot Saturday, or Twitter campaigns, or connecting directly with a community. So here are a few examples of tweets from indie devs that have done really well. The first is from my friend who's making a game called Olliefrog Toad Skater. You'll notice a few things about this tweet. It's not a lot of text, so people's eyes won't glaze over trying to read it. It uses emoji to illustrate what the text is saying, which gives it a little bit of flair. And it uses just one hashtag, the game dev hashtag, which can surface it in game dev communities without overloading the tweet. It also includes a very cool video that shows off the tweet, and this is the most important part, the visual. The video shows off what the text says, it gets right into the action, and it stays in the action, and it shows how vibrant and fun the world is. And here's another example of an indie game tweet that appeals a little bit more to the development side of Twitter. This is from the developer of the game Sailforth, which I did some marketing and production work on. Note that the text of the tweet isn't too technical or too much getting into the weeds. This will catch the eye of people who know what the developer is talking about, who can then read the rest of this Twitter thread, because this was a thread going into the details of development. But for people who aren't on the technical side of development, for fans of games, for example, the video does a good job visually representing what he's saying in a way that still makes sense. Gamers who don't know much about development can still appreciate this video, and getting a behind-the-scenes glimpse makes them more excited to play the game, to see how it plays out in real time. And bolstered by the need to stay entertained and engaged throughout the pandemic, TikTok has emerged as the top runner for best social media to promo your game on, if you can hit the algorithm right. Now, this advice may very soon become irrelevant if TikTok gets banned in the US, but for now, let's act like it won't. I'm not a TikTok expert, and there are a few other talks here at GDC that will have more information than I do about how best to create content for TikTok specifically. But much of the same rules as Twitter apply here. Don't be too corporate, show your personality, have fun with it. Trends are important on TikTok, so make sure you take some time to understand the app before posting to it. Learn how to use trending sounds and hashtags. TikTok is hard to parse, and you will likely fail quite a bit before getting a hit TikTok, but I really do think it's the biggest driver of interests and wish lists of all the social media platforms. It's all about viral content. It's a bit harder to cultivate a community through TikTok, but it's a great way to reach the masses. Games that go viral on TikTok often get noticed by journalists and streamers, and all it takes is one popular video to get a lot of attention. Here are a few indie game TikTok accounts that have been wildly successful. I highly recommend you check them out to see what hits and what doesn't. One More Multiverse is a great example of an account that uses being personable as a way to explain their game. A lot of times, one of the developers will be in the video themselves, showing their face. The game Mail Time has found a lot of success by the creator showing her development process and posting clips of funny bugs that are going on in her game. Landfall Games is a bigger studio, but they've done a great job getting a huge following on TikTok because they have a lot of silly games and they like to post little clips from that. Inky Fox is the solo dev of the game Omno, and if you can see, they're tiny numbers, but you can see those first videos there all have millions of views, which contributed to the success of that game. He posted a lot about what it's like being a solo dev, what it's like developing this game, and that got him a lot of followers. And then this game from one of the creators of the game Tiny Glade, you can see, again, that first video there has almost 10 million views on TikTok. Now, Anastasia Opara recently posted a great Twitter thread breaking down the TikTok strategy, so definitely check that out if that's something you're interested in. And often the people running these accounts will post blog posts or Twitter threads going through their process. There are plenty more of examples out there, so do a little bit of research and chat with your friends and other people you know who are using TikTok to see what approach is best for you. Now, like I said earlier, Discord can be a really good place to build a community as long as you have the energy and time to take care of it. A good Discord community can make an indie game. But remember, your community is a reflection of your game and you, so be sure to set rules and moderate to cultivate your community. Make sure you use your Discord as more than a place to just throw devlogs in and leave it alone. Chat with your fans, talk about the other games that you're playing, other hobbies that you have, show off your art to each other. If you're comfortable with it, you can set up monthly voice calls or dev streams to chat live with the people in your Discord. It's good to give perks to people in your Discord. These are the true fans of you and your game, and you want them to feel special and appreciated. You can do game key giveaways, you can give them behind-the-scenes info, you can do polls to let your community make small decisions about your game. You can even encourage them to do fan art of your game and chat with them about the process of development. Okay, yes, Steam is not technically a social media platform, but it is important to use if you're planning to release your game on Steam. You'll want to set up your Steam page as soon as possible. Unless you're seeking a publisher, but even still, most smaller publishers are going to want to see a game on Steam already so that they can see the interest and wish list that you have. You want to set up your game or your Steam page as soon as you have good art to use for the capsules and the screenshots. You can change the art as many times as you want, so don't worry if it's not final. Use that message that we came up with earlier as your short description, and be sure to include the bullet points in the long description of the game. Remember that wish lists convert anywhere from 10 to 30% to sales in the first year, so make sure you're accumulating the number of wish lists you want before launch. If you're the one setting your launch release date and you don't have the number of wish lists that you really want to have in order to make the sales you want, you can just delay your game a little bit to do a little bit of more marketing. And use the Steam announcements feature to tell followers about your development process. Any Steam events your game is in, when a new demo is up, anything like that. Short of the $100 you have to pay to put a game on Steam, it's free marketing. The discussion section of your community page on Steam is a great place to cultivate your community. Players will ask questions and leave feedback there, and those are going to be the most excited and hardcore players for your game. Be responsive, and they'll spread the word for you. Speaking of people spreading the word for you, this is also not technically a social media platform, but word-of-mouth marketing cannot be underestimated. There's going to be a portion of your players who aren't chronically online, who don't have Twitter accounts or TikToks, and who don't check the Steam discovery queue every week to find games that they'd like to play. Word-of-mouth marketing is nearly impossible to quantify, but it's important to remember that no one will talk about your game unless you're also talking about your game. If there are people you regularly hang out with or interact with that don't know you're making a game, that needs to change. You don't need to be annoying about it, but keep your friends updated on what you're doing and what you're working on. Making a game is cool. Your friends want to support you. Even strangers will support you if you're friendly. If you're taking regular horseback riding lessons, it'd be a good idea to slip in a, "Hey, did you know I'm working on a video game about horses?" And you'll get other people interested in what you're working on. I'll give you a real-life example. Recently, I had stopped by a smoked salmon shop in Seattle, where I'm from, to buy a gift for my dad for the holidays. I asked the cashier for some recommendations, and then we started chatting about when I had moved to Seattle and what I was doing. Started talking to him about my job and the games that I'd worked on. And now he's writing down the titles of the games that I'm working on. He's like, "This is so cool. I'm really interested in this game. I'm going to go home and play it." All because I just started up a small conversation with a person in a shop. And that also means that other people in that shop were hearing me talk about the game that I'm working on, and they may also be interested in it. You should also make sure to have some sort of take-home item about your game, especially if you're going to a conference like this one. This can be business cards or postcards with info about where to find your game. And a shout out to the developers I met yesterday who pulled out a Steam Deck with a build of their game on it. That was a super cool way to see a game in action. You could also consider making a cool t-shirt with your game's title and imagery on it, or some sort of fun phrase that'll get people approaching you and asking you about it. You could make stickers to hand out to people who seem interested, make the stickers cool enough to be attractive to people who are into more than just your game, but also include the game's title or aesthetic so that people remember what it is about. But also be kind to the environment and don't put stickers all over everything everywhere. There are a lot of other platforms you can use to build a following, and each has its pros and cons. And here's a quick rundown of a few more. Kickstarter is a lot of work, but it does give you a built-in following and funding. It's up to you to decide if you're willing to sink the time and energy into running a Kickstarter. Reddit is like the Wild West. I've seen indie games go viral on there successfully, but it seems to be mostly dumb luck. If you're already an avid Reddit user, I'd recommend posting info about your games in the relevant subreddits, but if you're not, I wouldn't say it's worth the time. There can be a lot of specific rules to each of the subreddits, and it can often be just a waste of time if you're posting things and not getting a lot of attention. Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr aren't worth your time unless you already have a big following on them. If you have personal accounts on these platforms, it may be worth it to occasionally post dev updates so your family members know what you're up to, but it's up to you if that's worth the energy. And then in the wake of Twitter's impending collapse, a lot of other social media sites have been popping up to take its place, but I've yet to see one that's really been good for the purposes of indie marketing. All right, now let's get into the meat of it. This is the hour-a-day marketing plan. This is a plan I've invented that will take you 1 hour of work a day, 5 days a week, from now until you launch the game, that will make marketing much more manageable. Ta-da! Here it is. I know, super exciting, right? I love fancy boxes with words in them. So, the overview of this plan. You do social media on Monday. That's posting and maintaining your Twitters and your TikToks and all the other great places you've stuck stakes in. On Tuesday, you're going to build out your press list. Till now, I've talked mostly about building an audience, but it's important to engage games press and content creators with your game as well. On Wednesday, you'll work on networking and applying to festivals. Thursday is for writing up a devlog and working on your Steam page. And then Friday is content creation. This is organizing screenshots and videos and editing them for posting on various sites. So Monday, Garfield's favorite day of the week. On Monday, you're going to schedule posts on your social media. For Twitter, you can schedule posts natively in the desktop app. So write them up, schedule them during a time of day that makes sense. A lot of times you're going to want to be posting midday Eastern Standard Time, unless you live, across the pond, in which case post it during the day. You don't want to be posting tweets at midnight. No one's going to be awake to read them. Create a TikTok or two and save it to your drafts to post later in the week to make sure you're spreading out your posting schedule. And remember that visuals are the most important on any site. So include a pretty screenshot or a fun GIF or a cool video. Talk to your community on social media day as well. You should be casually talking with them throughout the week, but Monday is the day to follow up on replies to your tweets, check your DMs, all that good stuff. And then you also want to work on your own list of following, people you're following. So follow people that you're engaged or you're interested in and engage with their content. That way you can strike up friendships online to find people to support you, your work, and your game. On Tuesday, you're going to work on your press list. This is going to be a spreadsheet where you keep track of press people and influencers who would be interested in covering your game for major marketing beats. When you have a new trailer, when you announce a release date, when the game actually comes out, etc. Include the big people at the review, like the reviews editors at major sites, but don't forget smaller streamers and niche game sites. I will continue to reiterate this. That's where you'll find your most ardent fans. You can search tags on Twitch to find streamers who stream the kind of game that you're making. You can go to the reviews section of your favorite games press site and find reviewers who have written reviews for a game that's similar to yours. You can even set up a Google form and post it where people can easily fill it out so you can get their information quickly. Do not make it hard for press and content creators to find and contact you. Here's an example of what your press list could look like. Make sure you have the person's name, email address, Twitter handle if applicable, website, if they're a streamer, what site they stream on, and if they're press, what site they write for, a link to the website, what platforms they play games on, what region they live in, so when you send them emails, you're making sure you're sending them at prime time, and any notes that could be helpful in your reach out to them. It's important to note that you should only use publicly available information. If a person doesn't have their email address listed anywhere on any of their social media or websites, then they probably don't want to be contacted via email. Use your best judgment and don't spam people. On Wednesday, you're going to do some networking and you're going to apply to game festivals. Especially if you're making a game by yourself, you don't want to isolate yourself from other devs. Join your local indie dev group if your city has one. Join Discord for indie devs working in the engine you're working in or working in the discipline that you're working in. Find meetups, go to online conferences, go to in-person conferences. Talk with people about more than just your game. Make friends is what I'm saying. Your friends will support you. And hey, you're at GDC right now, so you're already doing this. Good job. When you've met every single indie dev in the industry, or just when you're feeling a little less social, you can also apply to game festivals on this day. Big and small festivals are happening all the time, and a lot of them are online and don't require a lot in the way of content. Steam has a ton of demo fests, and there's a great resource put out by the Indie Houses, which is a collective of indie publishers that you can use to track events. That website link is right up there. Make sure your game is at the right stage of development before you submit, though. Being IGF nominated would be incredible, but don't submit your game to IGF when you still have 3 years left of development. Some festivals focus on finished games, and some of them focus on in-progress games. Thursday is for writing up a devlog and updating your Steam page. You don't need to do a devlog every week unless you love doing that. So this day can also be to catch up on other things. Devlogs don't have to be long or unique. It can just be a little blog explaining the new content you've added to your game, bugs you've run into and how you fix them, and any upcoming showcases you're in or demos you're planning to put up. Cross-post this devlog to your website, your Discord, Steam, link to it from Twitter, maybe even make a small video to put on TikTok. It's a great place to get a lot of content for a lot of the different websites you'll be using. For Steam maintenance, you're going to work on polishing the marketing copy for your game, update the art if it needs updating, check your wishlist numbers, and if you're into analytics, you can get into Steam UTM links. Make sure your tags are accurate on Steam, since that's a way that a lot of people will find your game. And then check the discussions tab on your community page to see if anyone's chatting about your game, asking questions about it. Again, another great way to interact with the people who are interested in your game. And then on Friday, you're going to create content to use during the rest of the week. Throughout the week, as you work on developing your game, you'll want to take screenshots and videos as you work. On Friday, take that content and organize it. Make GIFs, convert your 16:9 videos into 9:16 videos for TikTok, and consolidate your assets. Keep these organized in a nice folder so you can easily access them to schedule them out on Monday, which is social media day. I like to do separate GIF, screenshot, and video folders, and then another folder that I title Already Posted, that I move the asset to once I've posted it, just to make sure I'm not posting the same content over and over again. On this day, you can also schedule a post for Screenshot Saturday on Twitter, and sometimes all you do on Friday is edit one TikTok video, and that's great. That's a lot of work. TikTok videos take a long time to edit. Good job. I'm proud of you. So there it is, 5 hours a week to market your game. Now, if you're thinking 5 hours is still a lot of time to spend marketing a game, that's fair. If you're working on your game in your free time, spending a whole hour on marketing a day may seem absurd. To that I say, spend as much time as you have. You don't have to do devlogs. You can smush days together or shorten it to 30 minutes a day. Whatever works for you. The important thing is getting your game out there. So however you can make it manageable to you is the best way to do it. One post a week is better than no posts a week. One devlog a month or every 2 months is still better than none. So once you've been marketing your game, building your press list, posting devlogs, finishing your game, what now? Well, the marketing doesn't stop once you launch your game. I'm going to take a second and go over the important marketing beats that you should be reaching out to press to and posting everywhere for, leading up to your game's launch. The obvious first one is your game announcement. If you haven't done this already, make sure when you put up your Steam page and release your trailer, you're also letting everyone know that you're making a game. So reach out to press and let them know, hey, I'm making this game, here's the trailer for it, here's some screenshots, here's, if you have an anticipated release date, let them know. The next big beat will be when you announce your launch timeframe. Now this can get a little tricky. You can choose to announce your launch timeframe at the same time as your game announcement, or you can hold off until you have a solid date locked in. But if it looks like it's going to be a year or two before you have another big marketing beat, feel free to release an updated trailer with a coming Q3 2024 end slate. Then you'll want to reach out to press and content creators when you have a new demo up or when you're going to be in big festivals. Because there are smaller festivals happening all the time, you want to make sure to only reach out to press for the really big ones. That way you're not spamming their inbox. Things like PAX or The Mix or Day of the Devs or Indiecade, those are ones that press will have an eye on, and if you send them an email ahead of time, they'll know that they can come check out your game at that festival. And then once you have a solidified launch date, that's when you want to start reaching out for coverage interest. You'll want to announce your release date no more than a few months in advance. If it's too early, people are going to forget about it. So around the same time that you announce your release date, or about a month before you actually release your game, you'll want to start providing review keys to your press and your content creators. Make sure you give them plenty of time to review your game, and also make sure to give them an embargo so they know when they can start actually posting content about your game. And then finally, launch day. That's your last, well, that's not your last big marketing beat, but that's the biggest marketing beat that you want to reach out to everyone you know for. So, launch day. On your launch, you're going to post everywhere, and I mean it. Post on your Facebook account that you haven't used in years. Dig up your Tumblr password and post there. Print out a flyer and hang it up in the town square. The hardest part of marketing is getting people to hear about your game, so make sure everyone can hear about it. You're also going to want to send emails to your press and content creators list. This email should be relatively brief. It should be clear what your message is. The subject line is something like, Roguelite Horse FPS Gun Horse releases today. And in the body of the email, include your short description, your bullet points, a link to the Steam page, a link to your press kit, your press release, a nice small-sized GIF or screenshot, and a Steam key. You don't want to create an extra step by making the press and influencers have to ask you for a key. The more steps they have to take to cover your game, the less likely they are to cover it. And don't be afraid to ask for Steam reviews. They're super important for getting your game traction on Steam. Now, Steam discourages you from explicitly asking for positive reviews in your game, but you can reach out to your friends, your Discord, your followers, and very politely explain that you'd love to hear their feedback in the form of a Steam review. And reply to the reviews if you have reviews come in that aren't so positive, but are calling out specific issues in your game. Like if someone leaves a negative review and says, there are a lot of bugs, and I didn't like it, You can reply to that review and say, hey, thank you so much for the heads up. I'm working on these bugs, or I've released a patch that addresses these bugs. I'd love for you to try the game out again. And then launch with a launch discount. This is standard practice nowadays, so make sure you've locked in your launch discount at least 2 weeks before you release your game on Steam. People are more likely to buy a game when it's on sale, and if it's on sale when you launch it, they're doubly as likely to buy it. Now, a press release can be a good way to get the attention of press who might not otherwise see your game. I won't go into the details of how to write a press release. It involves a good bit of formatting, so if you haven't done it before, make sure to Google it. But make sure to Google it if you haven't written one before. Once you have the press release, you're going to save it as a text file. You're going to get 6 to 10 nice screenshots. Make sure you include the key art for your game, both with and without the title. That's a big thing that press asks for a lot. And then you're going to go to gamespress.com. That's the website where press releases about games are hosted. They'll give you information about how to send the press release to them. And that way they'll ingest it and they'll post it on their website where games journalists have access to it and they can see the press release that you've released and they'll get access to the screenshots as well. Make sure to include a way to contact you in the press release. If you want, you can make a press@domain email address so that you don't get spammed at your personal email address, because this will be public information. So you've done a bunch of marketing work and you've launched your game. But you're not sure how to tell if your marketing has been successful. Well, measuring success is a tricky business, and if you want to get into analytics and click-through rates and KPIs, this is not the talk for you. But assuming you're a small dev who already has limited time to focus on marketing, here are some great ways to measure your success. First of all, set realistic expectations and goals that will make you feel good. Everyone wants to be the next Stardew Valley or Vampire Survivors, but realistically, the large majority of indie games only make a few $1,000s in sales. Knowing that, success could look like getting 10 reviews on Steam on launch day, or posting a tweet that gets 100 likes, or getting 200 subscribers to your Discord. Or you don't have to think in numbers. It could be a friend telling you that they're so proud of the game that you've made. Or maybe your favorite small streamer compliments the lasso mechanic in your horse game. Or maybe you get your first purchase of your game in another country. Identify the success that matters to you, the things that will make you feel good, and use those as barometers. Don't base your game's success off of any other game's measure. Comparing yourself to others will only bring you down. So you've launched your game, you've had some successful and not so successful marketing beats. What do you do now? How do you keep the conversation going? First things first, be proud of what you made. Making a game is incredibly difficult, and to do that and release it is a very impressive task. If you're not thrilled with your sales, remember that most people buy games when they're discounted. Check Steam's rules for how often you can discount your game, and if you'd like a boost to your sales, make sure you're following and keeping up with the discounts. Continue to engage with your community and make sure to address any bugs or issues that come up in a reasonable amount of time. If people see that a game is continuously being worked on, they're more likely to buy it. If there's a feature that you didn't have time to get to before you launched your game, now's the time to add it. New content, updates, and DLC are all good post-launch marketing beats, and they can drive more people to play your game. Remember, people can only hear about your game if you're talking about it, and some people might not hear about it until months after it comes out. You can announce your game as many times as you want. In a month or two, throw up another tweet that's like, "My horse shampooing game is out now," with an embedded trailer. You never know when it's going to hit the right people at the right time. Someone might see that tweet and be like, "Oh, this game just released. I have to go buy it right now," even though you released it, 3 months ago. And continue to seek out and submit to festivals and Steam events. Now you can submit to the festivals that prefer finished games like IGF or Indiecade. And there are always Steam events happening. Chat with your fellow devs to know when genre-specific or content-specific events are happening. Keep your fans engaged for your next game. Keep chatting with them and let them know your plans ahead of time. These are the people who are most likely to spread the word when you have your next game coming, when you start working on another game. So don't forget about them. Anything can be a marketing beat. If you see a lot of interest for your game in another region, find a localizer to translate your game and release it. That's a marketing beat. If you feel like your launch trailer was a bit lackluster, cut a new one or hire a trailer maker and re-announce your game with the new trailer. If you really feel up to the challenge, you can release your game on another platform, another PC storefront, for example, or you can look at mobile or console. Just make sure you know what you're getting into and consider talking to a publisher or other devs that have self-published before looking into porting to a console. You can also look for non-games related connections. I worked on a game called Space Otter Charlie, where you play as an otter in outer space, and we reached out to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which has a Twitch channel where they live stream live animals at the aquarium. And they actually streamed the game for a few hours. It was a really great way to make a connection to a non-games group that would not have otherwise heard about the game. Here's a quick rundown of good talks to check out if you're interested in indie marketing. If you want to take a picture of this slide and then look up all the things later, I know it's a lot of content. The Indie Soapbox talk that is happening right after this one, that'll have Paige and Nick from AgroCrab. They've done a lot of great work marketing their next game on TikTok. And remember that these will all be in the GDC Vault as well, so don't feel like you have to go to every single one. There's 3 on Thursday, all at the exact same time, which, But also remember that you're at GDC, so use this time to make connections and tell people about your game. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. I hope you now have a better understanding of how to market your indie game by yourself without a budget. We have some time for questions, so if you have any questions, step up to the microphone and make sure to say your question directly into the microphone, and I will answer it as best as I can. If you'd like to follow up on anything, feel free to DM me on Twitter. I'm always happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Start now?
Yeah.
Quick question. So what do you recommend? Well, I know it says no budget, but hypothetically speaking, if you had a budget for TikTok, what would you recommend on a daily basis and for what period of time?
So if you do have a budget to spend on marketing, this comes down to the connections that you've made. You can find people who do work marketing indie games on TikTok, reach out to them, ask them if they have, what their availability is like. A lot of times you're going to want to focus your marketing to right before the game's launch. So if you have the budget for 3 months of TikTok marketing, make sure it's the 3 months before your game launches. If you don't know what amount of time to do, generally, it's up to how much money you have and how much the person you're hiring costs. You want to do maybe 1 or 2 TikToks a week. A lot of people will charge per video or per hour. So it's essentially up to the budget that you do have.
So you're saying it's better to allocate the dollars to a person that maybe like an influencer or something versus me personally putting out the video. Is that what you're saying?
No, so if you have the money to hire someone to run the TikTok for you. Is that what you're asking about?
No. Like, let's say I have a game and I have the money to promote the video.
Oh,
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, in general,
I'm sorry.
spending money on ads or spending money to promote a post, that generally doesn't do well. Across the board, usually paid ads or promoted videos on TikTok or promoted tweets, they aren't worth the spend. There's research that's shown that the click-through rates for those are just, you generally aren't going to get your money back on those.
Okay, I understand. It was just that the confusion about, actually expanding the audience. Like you engage the audience, but then you need to actually build the audience, though. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. My name's Corinne. I work for New Media Manitoba. We help interactive digital media companies in Manitoba, Canada. And this is a great framework for many of our devs and new studios. At what point should our studios be considering working with a marketing firm and expanding beyond the do-it-themselves?
So the biggest factor in that is if they have the budget for it. If you find yourself with, if you've gotten funding from a grant or, an external funding source, and you don't need that funding for yourself for the game's development, that's a good time to start looking for external marketing firms. And that's also a good time to shop around. You want to make sure that you have a firm that you both can afford and is also going to be able to give you the support that you need. But if you have money and it's a toss-up between marketing or hiring a really good artist for your game, you may want to put it toward the actual development of the game first. And then if you get more money later on, then you can move on to looking to outsource that.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks for the talk, Michelle. Is it a good idea to use the same content across all of the different social media accounts, or is it better to make sure every piece of content is unique?
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely want to cross-post your content. If you make a video for TikTok, you can post that on Twitter, post it on Instagram if you have one. Yeah, if you're making one piece of content, make sure to post it on all of the platforms that you have. That way you're not spending a lot of time making content for a lot of different platforms.
I see. And you mentioned launch discounts. What are your thoughts on that versus like pre-orders? And if you're offering a price for pre-orders, should you give a discount compared to that? Yeah,
so pre-orders are a little tricky to do, but if you're able to manage them, I would say offer the pre-order at the same discount that you're offering the launch discount at, because that is also an extra incentive for people to pre-order your game because they'll see that it's pre-order and get a discount. You could even offer the pre-order at a higher discount rate to get people more interested. Just make sure that the people who pre-ordered your game are not getting screwed out of the 10% launch discount or whatever.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Michelle, really helpful talk. So I was just wondering, at what stage in the development process do you think is the best time to start marketing?
As soon as you have announced your game. As soon as people know you're making a game, you want to start doing your marketing. If you have limited time to focus on it, generally 6 months before launch is sort of the minimum amount of time you want. A year before launch is good. If you're working on games super part-time and you know it's going to take you like 7 years, you still want to be talking about it, but you don't need to be doing the weekly plan that I had until about a few years out.
Okay, for sure. And a follow-up question to that. I was just wondering, do you recommend like kind of documenting your process as you're developing the game so that you can actually, because I know there have been a lot of posts that have done really well where you show like the early stages of your game and then moving on to like how far it's come. So do you think that's a good idea to be documenting your process along the way? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, documenting your development process is a great tool for marketing for exactly the reason you said. A lot of posts that are like, here's where the game started and here it is, 3 years later. Those posts do really well because people love to see the development process of a game.
All right, for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Great talk. So, trying to frame this. For my project, I have a lot of anxiety about the tone clashing with marketing. I'm going for a moody, atmospheric, mysterious type of game. And if I'm making whimsical, funny posts, or if I'm showing behind the scenes of these things, I feel like I'm creating a clash between what I'm trying to deliver and what people are seeing. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so the biggest thing to remember when you have a tone clash with the marketing versus the tone of your game, it goes back to the people follow people thing. So humans are humans, and even if your game has a moody tone, the people playing it aren't going to necessarily be that moody kind of person all the time. So they will want to hear the funny stories about the bugs that you run into, or just a lighthearted chat about whatever specific thing is in your game. Definitely focus your marketing a little bit more on the moody tone so that people know that is the tone of the game. But remember that people like to see the human element of game development, and so it's fine to have your marketing be more human than it is about the tone of the game.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Fantastic talk, thank you.
Thank you.
Quick clarifying question. You said that you want to get your Steam page out as soon as possible. Does that also count for like many multi-year indie unfunded projects, where it might be a long time before the game is out?
Yeah, so what time to get your Steam page out can kind of be tricky, and there are a lot of resources out there that talk more about it. In general, you want to have it out as soon as possible, again, to drive people to do something. When you're talking about your game, you always want to have a call to action, and that call to action in that case is to wishlist it. There is a little bit of a boost that you get when you first post your game on Steam. So like I said, wait until you at least have the art to do the capsules and a good trailer to post your game or to release your game on Steam, because you don't want to release a page that's barren. But even games that have been in development for a long time, it's always good to just have somewhere to point people where they can take an action if they're interested in the game.
Okay, but it sounds like, good art and some mechanics and a video is what we want first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the talk. When it comes, with word of mouth being as powerful as it is, when it comes to spreading word of mouth, should one rely on demos and discounts to sell the game, or how careful should you be with giving out free copies of the game to friends and family or people who might talk about the game when they play it?
Yeah. So yeah, the question about when to give out free copies of the game to encourage word-of-mouth marketing, it's a tricky one. You want to make sure that you're not devaluing your game. So if you're handing out like bundles and bundles of Steam keys to like everyone you know and don't know, then your game is going to get a reputation of being like, oh, you don't need to pay for that. So yeah, give out Steam keys to your family and your friends, and you know the press and influencers that you've identified as good people to talk about your game. But make sure that you're not just giving one out to everyone that asks. You can even sort of give a little hint. If people ask about your game, they're like, "Hey, I'm interested in covering your game. Do you have a Steam key?" And maybe they don't have a big following at all. You can say something like, "I'm sorry, I don't have any to give out right now, but the game is going on sale next week." Let people know that there's a time they can get it on discount. Because, yeah, you want to make sure that you're not devaluing your game in the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi. So one of the questions I had was around YouTube and Twitch. Do you see it as a devlog platform, just a place to host trailers, stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. So YouTube and Twitch are both good places, like you said, to put devlogs, to do dev streams if you want to do that on Twitch. It's a lot of effort, which is why I didn't include it in the marketing plan that I have, because a stream itself could be more than an hour a day, right. You know. But yeah, if you have the tools to do it, Twitch is a great place to show off your development process, and YouTube can also be a good place to post dev videos or post-stream videos, or even little like, how did I make this thing in this game? So yeah, if that's something you're already inclined to do, feel free to do it. I just think that the barrier to entry to making videos and streaming is pretty high, so it does take a lot of time and effort to get started.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening, Michelle. Thank you for your talk. Excellent framework. I'm the co-founder and co-owner of a tiny independent game studio, Wildfound Studios. And my question is, what do you consider is more important between your marketing for your game studio or your game, or how do you strike a balance so one doesn't overpower the other?
Yeah, so in terms of marketing for a game versus a game studio, I would say focus on the game first if you don't already have a following, because the game is going to get more attention. Marketing for a game studio is a little harder to do, because people are going to be following your studio for the games you make anyway. So market for the game first, get the following for the game that you've made, and that way you can convert those followers to follow your studio and get updates about other games that you may make in the future.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for the talk. How worth it is maintaining a email list or newsletter?
So that depends. Oh, to repeat the question, how worth it is it to maintain an email list or newsletter? It kind of depends on like what your following looks like and how the ability you have to send out newsletters. So if you use MailChimp or whatever, if you know how to use those tools, if you're able to format a nice looking newsletter, send one out every few months or so, then yeah, it's a good idea to have an email sign up on your website to drive people to that. But in general, it's sort of hard to build a community off of that because it's not a two-way communication stream. It's just you're just blasting out this information to people, and it does take a little bit of work up front, a little bit of effort. So if it's something you already have down or something you've done, it's a good idea to do. But in general, it's not necessary.
Thanks.
Hi. I'm worried that there's a finite number of videos that I could make for my game that would communicate something new about it. Is that likely just nerves on my part, or are there some games which are harder to market through short clips?
Yeah. So in terms of making video content about your game, It is true that there are some games, especially games that are more about a singular gameplay loop, that are going to be a little bit harder to create new and interesting content with. But that's when you rely on other forms of, the dev process. That's when you make videos about bugs that you've run into. You make videos about how you've, made a certain aspect of the game, or how you've decided on the character design or this mechanic. Just remember that anytime, at any point, someone could be watching the video that you've posted for the first time. So it's not a big deal if you're repeating content or if a lot of your videos look the same. But just make sure to add a little bit of variety in terms of what you're saying in the videos.
Okay, sorry. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. So being on a student dev team who truly is on a no-budget DIY marketing kind of thing, I was kind of curious about the reaching out to press lists type things versus going to networking events. Is it kind of like a feedback loop of if you do the networking events, you will find press, or is it worthwhile to reach out to press and then go to networking events?
Yeah, thanks. So the question was about if it's worth going to networking events to meet press, and then, or is it worth just reaching out to press ahead of time? And the answer is kind of both. So when you go to networking events, you will meet with press, and that goes back to the making friends and talking to people as if they're people. So you'll meet press there, and then you'll be able to keep in touch with them. But also, there are a lot of press that you may not meet at events, and you're not guaranteed to have them available to network with, in which case it's good to reach out to them via email as well. A lot of times before events, if you're going to an event where your game is being showcased, you'll want to reach out to press ahead of time, who you know is going to be there, or even if you're not sure, just to ask and say, hey, are you going to be at this event? I'm going to have a demo of my game there. I would love to chat with you about it. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming out to my talk. Remember to give, hold on, I need to look at this thing. Session evaluations. There will be an email sent to you to evaluate the session afterwards. But yeah, if you're interested in chatting more about anything, that's my Twitter handle, or if you'd like to see me around GDC, just feel free to come up, chat with me. I love talking about this stuff. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.